Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast hosted by the Midwestern Marx Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. Today, we'll be discussing Tucker Carlson's trip to Russia to interview President Vladimir Putin. We'll be discussing the immigration crisis at the border, how it's framed by bourgeois ideologues, the situation with the state of Texas and the federal government. We'll also be discussing how the role that social media plays, that these new technological, ideological fields plays in the war of position, in the battle of ideas, how communists should interact within social media, how we win the hearts and minds within these new fields of interaction, social interaction. And then lastly, we'll be discussing a clip about the government from two of the more prominent comedians of our day, Theo Von and Shane Gillis. So we'll get to talking about all that and much more right after the international.
All right, what's up, everybody? We're back. I'm excited about tonight's stream. I really am, brother. This thing with Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin is huge, and of course, right off the bat, the entire fake left is like, "No, why would you watch Tucker Carlson interview Vladimir Putin? Don't you know he's evil?" And all I gotta say is, you do it then, and I'll watch you talk to Vladimir Putin. But the notion that we should not watch this or not celebrate it as a way to get the truth out about a proxy war still ongoing right now, because we don't like Tucker Carlson, is absurd. He's a journalist. Let the man interview a giant national leader that, frankly, we should hear from, and we haven't throughout the entirety of the proxy war against his country.
I couldn't agree more. Let's save that for the portion of the discussion. First, how are you doing, brother?
I'm good. Sorry, I'm hot about that.
Ready to go.
Right, if you couldn't tell. Yeah, I'm good. Had a hectic day at work today, so kind of tired. Good to be here with everybody. I've been listening to Anti-During again while at work because a coworker has requested it, believe it or not. Anti-During he wanted to listen to. So been doing that, and because of that, reading a lot of old Engels, the letters and short works and stuff like that. I'm also still making my way through all of Martin Luther King's collected writings, which is really cool. What about you? How you doing? What are you reading?
Well, that's awesome to hear. Engels did not want to write Anti-During. By the way, shout out to the Fine Arts Revolution for the beautiful Heads of American Marxism that's currently on the background of Noah's new green screen. So the institute is rising, as some might say. Engels did not want to write Anti-During. Engels when Eugene Düring started gaining some prominence in the working class movement in Germany, Engels sends this famous letter to, well, not famous, it's not very well known, but this letter to Marx where he's like, after Marx told him, like, yo, you have to take down this Düring guy because he's gaining prominence within a movement that was already within a series of Marxist ideas that had become predominant. Engels tells Marx that he can lay warmly in bed studying Russian agrarian conditions and the Obshchina, the Russian commune, and study all these interesting things. But Engels is supposed to stop all of his work with dialectics of nature, take a cold swig of wine, and get to destroying this Eugene Düring fella. So it was a work that interrupted his magnus opus that would remain unfinished, Dialectics of Nature. But it was an incredibly important work, and it ended up becoming, as Lenin would go on to say, the sort of handbook of communism. The closest thing you can get to a textbook and in the field of Marxism from the classics themselves. And, textbooks play their role in the development of the worldview. They're not perhaps the highest expression of it, but they play an important component, an important stepping stone up there. But as far as myself, as always, I've been reading a little bit of everything, but what's most centrally within what's been the most central of my readings lately has been a rereading of Lukács, bouncing around from his text, the Ontology of Social Labor, which is this massive tome that in English the translation has only been done of 3 chapters: a Hegel chapter, a Marx chapter, and a labor chapter. I've been reading the labor one, which is they're all published as individual books. They're all like 130 page. I've been reading the labor one, which is the only one I had left to read, and conjoined with that, going back and rereading some of the Destruction of Reason, some of History and Class Consciousness, and in conjunction with that, I've also been reading Ilyenkov and contemplating as to whether the Marxist philosophy class I plan on teaching in the summer for the Institute should be a specifically focused on the work of Ilyenkov and Lukács. Maybe that might be a little bit selfish of myself, though. So,
well, it's a tough question, right? Ilyenkov is so important. Frankly, one of the only real Marxist-Leninist theorists of the late 20th century.
Right.
That was producing real, innovative Marxist work. There weren't many people doing that at the time. And so his going back and readdressing the dialectic and how we see being itself and the relationship between thought and being corrects a lot of errors that were happening, not just, here in the US, but in the Soviet Union, and addressed so many things that, if you could have gone by the Ilyenkov way, redoing education, right, would be huge. But he's sort of, it takes a lot to be able to understand Ilyenkov, right? You have to have a few stepping stones to get to him first. I have a few essays from his, they did a collection of some of his stuff, Intelligent Materialism. I don't know if you have that one.
Right here, right behind me.
So there's a few essays in there I wanted to put into my intermediate dialectics class, because it leads you sort of in reassessing what we've already learned and sort of deepening that understanding. He's just perfect for that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also he plays an extremely important role because he does something that Lukács in 48, which is when he writes The Destruction of Reason, I believe that's correct, late 40s. He says that there hasn't been a good book from a Marxist position that deals with the history of philosophy. There just hasn't, and specifically with German philosophy, which is the highest expression of philosophy, its culmination point in many ways. Lukács is the only person he can reference favorably is Karl Lowith, who he references his book, I believe it's called From Kant to Nietzsche. and it's not very good. He sees in many ways like the figure of Kierkegaard and Marx as he puts him in a homogeneous plane of just reacting to Hegel, and he also has his other famous book, Meaning in History, that, I mean, the chapter on Marx is horrendous. It's an interesting read. I like reading stuff I disagree with, but he just says that Marx is basically just covering up the essence of his philosophy, which is just the Judeo-Christian, eschatological sort of way of thinking about history, thinking about progress. So it's extremely disturbing to read. But
Lenkov does it though. He does it with
Yankov does it though, right?
dialectical logic, right?
Yep. And even the his dissertation, right,
Mhm.
on the ascension from the abstract to the concrete in Marx's Capital. It's really a history of the understanding of the abstract and the concrete, culminating, of course, then in Marx's philosophy. And it's a very brilliant work. And he's got another book that I don't think exists in paperback. I'm not sure. I've read it through the Marxist Internet Archive, and it's like a defense of Lenin's Materialism and Imperial Criticism, a text that even the Western Marxists that like Lenin, that claim to like Lenin, they usually like the post-1914 Lenin, and they reject the Materialism and Imperial Criticism one as vulgar and too materialist, too philosophically realist, and it's correlated to the postmodernized turn that Marxism takes in Western Marxism. But Ilyenkov does a splendid defense of that central text of Lenin in developing Marxist philosophy. So, but it's true. I when I tried to read Ilyenkov before having that like year-long period where I was only reading Hegel and secondary sources on Hegel and everything that I could get my hands on related to Hegel. Before that period, I tried to read Ilyenkov. I couldn't understand it. It took like that long study of Hegel to come back to Ilyenkov and be like, oh, this is brilliant. So I don't know if doing a course on that would be the most fruitful thing, but if I get selfish, I'll do it.
It's crazy to me because for me, a lot of it was just getting used to how he uses language.
Yeah.
Right. And it's strange, especially if you've never read any philosophy at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some getting used to. When I first even heard of him, my dad was a fan. So he was like, just stick with it, and here's a philosophy thesaurus. Here you go. Here's what ontology means. I didn't know any of that stuff going in. But yeah, we're way off topic. I'm sure that this is pretty inside baseball stuff, I guess. But
there's a couple.
It's so central to,
Yeah.
honestly, like, and the school or tradition of Marxism that he sort of represents and creates is central to American Marxism and to the sort of tradition we're a part of here in the U.S. It's coming into being right now. So it's really important to understand where he's at and what his contributions to Marxism were, because they're really important for us. Because what we were always missing here in the U.S. is precisely his area where his first step, he describes everything from always, right? Is its relational development according to universal and particular. And that's huge. And we never have. I was getting a guy yelling at me on social media earlier today that we fetishize Du Bois, and Du Bois was for race struggle, not class struggle. And I'm trying to explain, like, well, the Black freedom struggle is a form of class struggle from the Marxist view. And that didn't compute because there's this very one-sided view that all things must be this thing and nothing else, right? And Engels, speaking of anti-Düring, he mentions the sort of ideological mistake of the metaphysicists who would think like this. He would think things are one thing or another. Everything is yay, yay, nay, nay, and anything coming outside of that comes from evil for them. But really, everything is at the same time something else. Everything is at the same time becoming, right? And Ilyenkov really, every single question he approaches this from this grounding first.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. And again, without that philosophical foundation, everything else is just, you might have right opinions here and there, but you won't have knowledge. You won't have the consistency that a transformation of outlook would give you. A couple comments for future Homestead. I don't think Nietzsche is compatible with Marxism. He's an interesting person to read. He's, as Lukács argues, the culmination, the highest expression, I think, of philosophical irrationalism, the reactionary philosophy of the bourgeoisie post 1848. But he's very interesting. Every time I teach him, specifically the younger men in the class identify a lot with Nietzsche. And he's central in many ways to, the spirit of the age, the postmodernist spirit of the age. There's definitely been what Daniel Tutt calls a Nietzscheification of our culture. So if you want to read a little bit more about Nietzsche and Marxism, I would definitely recommend Losurdo's The Aristocratic Rebel, his book on big tome on Nietzsche, and also the recent book from our comrade Daniel Tutt called How to Read Like a Parasite, How the Left Got High on Nietzsche, which is an excellent title and a good, really good critique of the influence that Nietzsche has played, specifically in the Western left, what we would call the fake left. So I've been plowing through his book. It's really good, really insightful. It's great scholarship, definitely following the line of the great Domenico Losurdo's work on Nietzsche. And hopefully we can have some sort of event around the book with Daniel or an interview or something like that. So you can look forward to that. And Victor, as far as teaching a course, I taught a course this past summer on the history of Western philosophy and Marxism, where we worked ourselves from everything from the pre-Socratics all the way to contemporary philosophy, the role of social media, all that stuff. So it was a very broad course. But I'm going to do one coming up on Marxist philosophy in specific. And there we'll cover not just the classics, but also some of the 20th century stuff. I'll try to sprinkle in some Ilyenkov and Lukács and Du Bois and all these other good stuff.
Honestly, I think Lukács gets a bad rap. He really does. People dismiss him because the Western Marxists all go right to him, but a lot of what the Western Marxists go to, or I don't even like calling them Marxists, the liberalism posing as Marxism that we have here, what they go to is the stuff that he later on in his life was like, yo, I was wrong about that. You know? And he sort of had this phase when his big book everybody references comes out, History and Class Consciousness, where he was going from idealism and an advanced idealism into a materialist outlook. And so he writes this while he's in this transition, and he later on goes, well, I was kind of wrong about this and that, and I didn't really know what I was talking about. I was working through the ideas. And people, they take him at this point and remove him from his context and say that's Lukács, but it's not. Lukács is the guy that taught in the Soviet Union that later on.
And there's a rational kernel even to the Lukács in 24. Like there's parts of it that are incorrect, but it's very important text. If you're a Marxist and you want to read the key text in our tradition for the 20th century, it's extremely important. Just because there's a few footnotes and certain things that lead to positions that have become key for the Western Marxists on the dialectics of nature, the understanding of subject and object, the reemphasizing of totality, the category of totality is tremendous. The reemphasis of the concept of praxis, something that's done alongside the efforts of Gramsci, who couldn't write dialectical materialism in his letters, so he had to get through the censors, he had to describe Marxism as the philosophy of praxis. So it's an incredible thinker, but if we keep going on this philosophy train, we won't get to what we're trying to get to. By the way, thank you so much for this excellent super chat from Battle Cossack. Argentina should be referred to as a banana stand. Sad but true. Yeah, it's extremely sad. I mean, we've been covering this since before the election of Milei, but I think it's going to be clear that, as Eddie wrote a while back, that Argentina might be the world's fourth world country. So whether we call it banana stand or the fourth world country, I don't know. It's seems to be going to shit. Hopefully, it brings it lights a fire in the labor movement and in the left to stop tailing the Kirchnerites.
It's been lighting a fire in the Argentine people for sure, and as it turns out, with every anarchist taking power, they're finding out that that state exists, and the supposed anarchist was literally sicking cops on protesting workers, which is just so ironic. They talk about this non-aggression principle, right? And when people are pissed off at what he's doing because it's making their lives unlivable and they protest, what does he do? He brings the hammer down on them, right? There's a difference between our hammer and their hammer, though, right? Our hammer is on the side of the people. It's the people's hammer, right? Theirs, it's literally sent out to crush the people as they complain that this guy is selling off their entire economy to giant conglomerates. It's silly.
No, yeah, absolutely. Anyway. And he's just such a ridiculous and lunatic, delusional figure. He was crying in his trip to Israel. Libertarian, getting so emotional while visiting a fascist, genocidal state.
Yeah,
isn't that so important for libertarianism? Anyways, we've had a few tweets on that go viral. What was that?
He loves liberty, though. Just liberty for just a few people. Everybody else, we gotta take theirs away so they can have it. Corporación America, they're the ones that need the liberty.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get into the topic of Tucker Carlson. I think we can start by watching the 4-minute video that he gives us describing why he's in Russia, what his intentions are, and a few other things. So let's give this a watch, and then let's break it down. I'm going to put it at 1.25. That shouldn't be too quick.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president.
Do you hear it, Noah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not hearing it for some reason, but I'll try to hear it through the live.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they've done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the US enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda, propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway. We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States, and we want it to remain prosperous and free. We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group, nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com. Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself. Thanks.
Nothing he just said there was wrong. And here's the thing. Every time you listen to Tucker Carlson, you're going to have somebody telling you like, oh, but he's bad. Oh, but it's just Republican, Democrat. I don't care. Right? When someone says something correct, and millions upon millions of people are seeing it, that's important. It doesn't matter what your opinion of them is. What Tucker Carlson is doing here is giant. The American people do have a right to know what Russia actually says, what Putin actually says, right? And the fact is, our entire media establishment has suppressed that for a very good reason. They don't want us to hear another side of this.
No, this is going to blow up the internet. Remember that Tucker had, year after year after year, the most popular show in cable news media, a show that was not afraid in various areas for whatever reason. I still don't know, to tell the truth about things pertaining to U.S. imperialism and U.S. foreign policy, which is extremely dangerous because the media is the most important tool, even more important than the military capabilities. The media is the most important tool of empire. It is how it is able to brainwash people, to keep them ignorant, and to keep them giving a thumbs up to a train of disaster, to wars that kill millions and feed off of the resources of our republic and destroy our country, destroy our people's lives, our cities. So when someone is telling the truth in various areas, as Tucker was with regards to Russia, he's one of the few people I know with an audience as large as he has, who actually brought up the attacks on the Uhuru group, a black socialist group. A lot of things we disagree with them in terms of outlook, doesn't matter, but they were pinned as Russian agents, foreign agents, and condemned under the same acts that they used to condemn Robeson and Du Bois through. And it was Tucker who allowed their story to air to millions of Americans, that allowed millions of Americans to hear the message of the Uhuru people and of Omeli Yeshiteli, their leader. So I understand Tucker has a whole lot of views that we don't agree with. I understand that he's perhaps not coming at this position from a genuine anti-imperialism. My question is, does that even matter? Does it matter? For us communists, it shouldn't matter whatever other inconsistencies he has. The fact is that this is someone that has a lot of influence over the common sense of our people, over how it is that our people view certain historical affairs. And when he's right, we have to be there and explain to the people how he's right, and use that rational kernel that he has given us to help them understand the phenomenon in a way that Tucker Carlson, even when he's right, is not able to understand to the level of that complexity as the Marxist outlook allows you to do. And in the process of explaining that phenomenon, explain other things too, and perhaps bring at some point a criticism of the areas in which he's wrong. He's very hawkish when it comes to China, whatever other, affairs he might be wrong about. The way he understands immigration might be wrong, etc. We can get to that after, but there has to be a common point. And these are areas of common point. When you just say, I condemn Tucker, I think this is wrong, who cares about Tucker, he's just this, he's just that, he's just whatever, you're not serious as a communist. Your sole purpose as a communist is to convince people, to bring people onto our side, to win the hearts and minds of the American people that think in various different ways. The same thing we're doing here with Tucker, which is seeing what his rational kernel is, the areas in which he opposes empires, the area in which he tells the truth about the media, about how it is they lie to you. The lying by omission is a very important point, because it's not just direct lying that, of course, occurs, but it's also omitting, which is a form of lying, a form of distorting and controlling and containing the narrative about certain events. So what we're doing with Tucker, we have to do with every other figure that ends up having similar rational kernels. It just so happens that Tucker, for whatever reason, has been the one that has been, out of the main guys that used to be a part, or that are still a part of the media establishment, of the U.S. media, mainstream media, which kicked him out because of these positions. He's a guy that tells the truth on a wide variety of things that other people have not told the truth about. So I think this interview is going to be huge. It's going to give the American people an insight into Putin's and Russia's side of things. And the view that I have is that Russia's side of things is the side of the working class internationally, and of the oppressed and the global South internationally. There is a side to this war. There is a side that's fighting against fascism. There is a side that is standing up to empire and to the interest of the US and NATO, which are the largest, most destructive forces the universe has seen. And that side is Russia. Yeah, they're not a socialist state. Do they have to be for us to support their war against fascism, their war against empire? No. Russia, if you look at it from the standpoint of what happened after the overthrow of the Soviet Union, is much closer to being a colonized country fighting for a sense of national sovereignty and national independence than it is to be in an imperialist country, or just a neutral capitalist power engaging in an inter-imperialist crisis fight. So reject all those horrendously wrong understandings of the issue. Russia's fighting on the side of humanity here, and Tucker allowing millions and millions of people, this is going to break the internet, allowing millions and millions of people to hear Putin is tremendous. It's a very positive development. At a time where, and excuse me, I've been rambling for a little bit, but at a time where this event has literally been the marking point of a change in world history. When historians 100 years down the line speak about the transition of global power from the imperialist West that held dominance for 500 years to the East, to Russia, China, Iran, and these other great powers that are non-imperialist great powers, that's Chavez's term, they're going to mark the failed proxy war against Russia as the turning point that culminates then in the incredible loss, both militarily and in the informational war, of the Zionist genocidal forces against the people of Palestine. These two events are conjoined, and they're the events that mark the nodal points of a transition into a new era in world history, where Western imperialist capital is no longer going to be dominant, no longer going to be able to exert its will on the rest of the world. The global South is standing up and saying no, and Russia is a part of that global South. It's a part of that global majority. And it's not just us saying it. Look at how the global South thinks about Russia. Look at how Venezuela, how Cuba, how various countries in Africa and in Latin America think about Russia. It's only us here with our brainwashed Russophobic consciousness that has been embedded in us and that we have been enculturated into. It is only that which leads us to see Russia as this big bad man, this big bad country that is the purveyor of evil and a great pariah on the world. That's bullshit. We have to escape that paradigm that the Matrix, if we want to call it that, has embedded into our brain and see things how they actually are.
100% on all counts, brother. I think that's precisely the problem here with all the censorship, all of this. It comes from the same place that Russophobia does, a social chauvinism, right? This notion that we're the smart, good ones that know better than everybody else. And you can't even let those voices in because all the dumb idiots here will hear them and get brainwashed by them, right? Like we can't make up our own minds what to think about what Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson have to say. Sorry, but I just have a lot more faith in the general intelligence of the people than that. You know, we can look at Tucker Carlson and say, this is amazing that he's doing with this and still disagree on something else. We don't need to always be, fully one thing or another. Things ain't that simple. Life ain't that simple. And if all Vladimir Putin is going to do is tell us evil lies and get his evil Russian grips into us, and we're just going to be too stupid to know the difference, then it should be very easy for our media to explain how he's lying. Just go look. Here's what he says. Here's the fact. Make up your own mind, right? But they don't do that, do they? No, they say you are not allowed to listen. And anyone who's saying, well, fuck Tucker Carlson and blah, 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 and this and that, all they are doing is coming up with a cool sounding way to say, yes, censor this. Because it's not perfect enough for them. And what is that? Altogether now, purity fetish, right? It is Tucker Carlson not being pure enough to play a role in this progressive struggle. I don't care about anything else right now. This particular thing is progressive, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And again, I mean, this isn't just something we do with Tucker Carlson. When parts of the so-called progressive Democrats call for lifting the blockade on Cuba, we publicize it. We call that a rational kernel. We call that something progressive. So it's about being consistent in how it is that we understand the key purveyors of the consciousness that various sections of the American people have. How is it that we ought to approach them? Is it just by condemning them for their impurities? Is that really an approach that is successful? I mean, how far has it gotten us? That's the approach that the vast majority of the left has used, specifically with the people that hold conservative views on certain social issues. I'm not saying we have to agree with them in those areas. We certainly don't. But the point is not that. The point is that to win people over, to convince people, you have to start from a point of contact, a common point that you can then disarticulate from the Carlsonian worldview and rearticulate it towards a worldview that explains that rational kernel better, which is Marxism. We can explain the proxy war against Russia better than Tucker Carlson can. So him getting people already to agree on the issue that this is a proxy war against Russia, letting people see Putin's worldview, is giving us a almost like a Trojan horse, an open door to showing the American people the truth. And in the process, showing why it is that we can understand it better, what the Marxist outlook provides for us, and what it means for them as working people.
Yeah, 100%. And again, people act as if saying this is a good thing puts you on like some team Tucker Carlson is on. We're all on a team now together. No, the struggle is always going to be the working classes against the ruling class, right? And you got to remember who Tucker Carlson is and where he comes from, right? He was a Fox News guy, like this comment just said, but he was fired from Fox News. The reason why did he get so much more popular than everybody else saying the same kind of stuff on the negative side, right? Glenn Beck was saying that stuff. Sean Hannity was saying that stuff. Why did Tucker Carlson's audience dwarf theirs? Because from time to time, they got some truth with him, right? And he didn't infantilize them. And this, first of all, made advertisers run screaming from his program. No one would advertise on Tucker Carlson's show, but Fox had to keep him on because he was that popular. And when he finally said too much, and it was about this proxy war, they let him go. They fired him. And what was the first thing he did when he got fired? He said, guess what? I have been lying to you my entire career. He said that. And he was saying the media infrastructure is built on lies. Just that alone is huge. And we can take that and run with it. It doesn't mean Tucker and us are on the same team, right? But I guarantee you, the people that are open to that message are open to the communist message. That's all they're really into it. Someone also asked a question. I forget where. Here we go. Chizaru said that he's an opportunist. He doesn't care about the people. Tucker Carlson is heir to the Swenson fortune. It's not about money for him. He has millions upon millions upon millions. For him, he genuinely believes in what he's saying. Now, is it wrong a lot of the time? Of course. But we got to get away from this sort of assuming we understand people's individual motivations. Instead, talk about it in a material way, right? When we talk about Tucker Carlson, we don't make leaps like that. We talk about the progressive nature of what he's currently doing, right? It's not about him as the individual. It's about the motion of class struggle in our country and how we can use this to fight against capitalism, right? I guarantee you, if we were to get interviewed by Tucker Carlson, we would win tons of people over to Marxism because we would give them a view that they'd never heard before by doing exactly what Carlos was saying, taking what we already know they get correct and just bringing it forward. We can explain that proxy war far better than Tucker Carlson can. But now that he's already convinced people and told them the truth that it is a proxy war, that gives us an in. If we ignore that, we're just idiots.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, you make a good point. Like you shouldn't assume when people are doing things as opportunists or not. But even if they are, objectively, what is going on? What is going on objectively is still the same, whether he's an opportunist or not. I don't care a lick if he's an opportunist. I really don't care. I mean, I hope he is. You know why? Because that means that the people he got to agree to certain positions on, you can use the fact that if he shows himself to be an opportunist at some point, you could use that in the process of dislocating them from his worldview towards ours. So it doesn't matter. What matters is that he's right in this issue. And we can explain again how he's right better. And Marius made a really good point earlier. He mentions now that we should be able to exploit divisions in the ruling class in favor of our class. That's absolutely correct. He also mentioned that Tucker represents a faction of the capitalist class that wants to make amends with Russia in hopes that they can draw Moscow away from China. That's also correct. There's a strong faction of the ruling class that sees perhaps because Russia has certain conservative values, or is relatively white from the standpoint of a skin, whatever reason it might be, that it aligns itself with Russia over and against China. It sees China as the ultimate enemy, and it sees the battle that we're waging against Russia as one that is objectively pushing China and Russia closer together, which that is just completely undeniable. The intensification, but the process of collaboration that the Chinese and the Russians have undergone after this proxy war has been much more than what it was. It was already working itself towards closer collaboration, but it's been intensified by the proxy war against Russia, and not just in Russia and China, but this whole new world that's really developing around the BRICS. So I think that's correct. The content I've heard him discuss on China is it's anti-China. Of course, he's had people who have been allowed to speak in a way that's favorable to China on his show, which is positive. But we can understand why he's good in one area and bad in another, and explain that to the people he already got to agree on the area where he is right.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to what the Marxism behind it, really. What is the relationship between these international contradictions and the national, right? What interest does our working class have, right? Our enemy is our ruling class, which is kind of supranational at this point, but its main, big stick is the American government and military and money, right? Mostly money that they take from us, by the way. They don't make it, right? They take it from us. But our interests, our material interests align with Russia, with a free Russia, right? That is led right now by Putin, right? So I don't know what I sort of spaced on what I was going to say, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about class interests. They're literally fighting our enemy right now.
Right, and this is an interesting point. If Trump is in power and doesn't do what he's promised to do as the quote unquote self-proclaimed anti-war candidate with regards to the proxy war against Russia, and Tucker Carlson just goes along with it, that literally just makes our job easier at pulling people from that crowd. Again, because we can explain it on the basis of their class interest. Just like when Trump said a bunch of nice anti-deep state, anti-establishment things while he was campaigning, and then virtually did none of that when he was president. What did that lead to? Well, it made it very easy for us organizing in the Midwest, surrounded by Trump workers, to bring those people to socialism. The Socialist Club we had, for instance, in university, the vast majority of people that were in it were previous Trump supporters, kids that had come from working class or farmer backgrounds, who came to socialism because of the way that we were able to get the rational kernels from Trump and re-articulate it to socialism, while showing how all of those good things Trump said, he didn't really realize any of them. Very few. But, he was still a war hawk in various areas. He tiptoed us into, a third World War by murdering Qasem Soleimani, this great unifier of the people of West Asia against the struggle in the struggle against terrorism, U.S.-funded terrorism. So in that failing to live up to the principles that they have already set, that the principles that won people over, it only makes our job of convincing people away from them and towards us easier. If it happens with Tucker, same thing.
Exactly. Did Trump drain the swamp? No. Did he bring productive industry back? No. Did he lock her up? Did he lock up Hillary Clinton? No. right? These are the big things that he campaigned on. Every rally he had, lock her up, lock her up. You remember that? Hillary Clinton deserves to be in prison for the rest of her life.
Oh my God.
That was a good thing when he said that, right? Did he do it? No. What happened was that he governed exactly like Obama did, and then exactly like Biden did after him. We have one party in this country. It's just got two names, as Du Bois said.
I also wanted to. There's an interesting component that we haven't touched about this interview, which is that it was they attempted to have it. Yeah, go ahead.
Before that, I apologize. I have a family thing, so like every night around this time, I have to call my mom. I'll be right back.
There is another component, which is the fact that the NSA spied 3 years ago on Tucker Carlson in order to get Fox News to prevent him from doing an interview with Vladimir Putin right at the beginning of the special military operations. That's something that I believe we covered when it happened. And it just goes to show what Edward Snowden has let us know for quite a long time already, which is the fact that the government spies on the American people in the interest of the national security imperialist state, not in the interest of the American people, nor in the interest of their security, preventing the sort of change in opinion in the American people that could be arrived at by them actually seeing Vladimir Putin and perhaps critiquing the funding of a war that not only sends hundreds of billions of dollars to neo-Nazis, but that has killed, over 1 million Ukrainians. Over 1 million lives have been lost unnecessarily just because of the West imperialist push against Russia and the usage of these neo-Nazi forces against the Russian people. But there's a good video from Nico House. Shout out to our friend Nico House, describing the hypocrisy of the liberal and I guess conservative outrage of Tucker Carlson being in Russia to interview Putin. So let's give that a listen and then analyze it.
So Tucker Carlson is on a trip to Russia, and the U.S. has collectively lost their fucking minds because of it. It seems like some in mainstream politics and media have this gut-wrenching fear that Tucker Carlson might interview Putin and do some real journalism. Now, the interview itself would be a big deal because of who Putin is and who Tucker is, but it's also a big deal for another reason. Tucker tried to do this before when he worked for Fox News, and the NSA, that's right, the U.S. government got involved, started literally going through this man's personal emails and basically forced Fox News to pull the plug on the interview. So now you have weirdos like Bill Kristol saying that Tucker Carlson shouldn't be able to re-enter the country, bro, just because he's in Russia. And they don't even know why he's there because technically, as of right now, the Kremlin has denied any interview that may or may not take place. Now, all these people in the mainstream don't want Tucker Carlson to interview Vladimir Putin because he's a quote-unquote enemy of the United States. But this is a new phenomenon. I assure you, because before, we would champion journalists who are willing to engage with perceived adversaries of the United States. For example, here's Larry King while working for CNN interviewing Muammar Gaddafi. Right? Could you imagine CNN actually doing an interview with Muammar Gaddafi today? It's Pulitzer Prize winner and former CNN journalist Peter Arnett discussing his interview with Osama bin Laden. Yep, that same Osama bin Laden. And yet, he didn't catch any flack for it. In fact, he was celebrated for it in just one of the most famous interviews on the planet. Now, we already know that journalism has in some ways always been under attack. But now, more than ever, they don't want you to hear anything from the other side. And do you wonder why that may be? Well, in this particular case, you have the most famous journalist on Twitter going to interview one of the most powerful world leaders right after Ukraine has basically gotten their asses handed to them. And Putin effectively came out on top. And I think that he might have a bone to pick with the Western world and the propaganda that they've put out regarding Russia in its fight against the neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine. But effectively, all Tucker Carlson will be doing is maintaining a time-honored tradition by other journalists. But he is being attacked for potentially doing the exact same type of work other mainstream journalists like Larry King and Peter Arnett have done. So is it really about the journalism, or is it about NATO and the United States getting exposed in more lies? Because they know that now people's eyes and hearts are open and are willing to hear the other perspective, the one that's not being provided by the mainstream media here in the States.
Okay, that's excellent analysis from our comrade Nico House. Absolutely right. An insane level of hypocrisy. And I mean, as you mentioned it, you've had leading U.S. journalists interview all the way back to Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, allowing these revolutionary leaders that were considered the key enemies of empire for a certain period of time, allow the American people to listen to what they have to say. Even as far back as the early 2000s, you have people interviewing Gaddafi, who was this excellent, great Pan-African socialist revolutionary leader who was overthrown and killed horrendously, just disgustingly, by the Clinton-Obama regime, destroying the most prosperous state in Africa, Libya, leaving it with nothing to show but a destroyed economy, destroyed prosperity that they had been able to achieve, literal open slave markets, and the development of terrorism that has spread well beyond Libya and affected, vast regions in Africa. So that's what they've been able to accomplish. But they were able to interview Gaddafi and quite a few other people. Some people that are, extremely not in our tradition. The Osama bin Laden, those sorts of cats. They interview those sorts of people because they recognize that there's a certain level of importance in seeing both sides of it. But it's gotten to the point where even that basic liberal understanding is rejected. And for those that say that, fascism is only eminent from the white supremacist parts of Trump's base and etc. No, man. If you look at what fascism actually is, as the most reactionary forces of finance capital, stripping the democratic rights that people have long fought hard to secure, we already have that with the national security state. Its principal source today in the U.S. is this national security state that's fully backed by finance capital, and that is in bed with both parties, but it's prefers to function, quite frankly, under the Democrats, because it puts a nice face, a nice little mask on top of their repressive, coercive, fascistic government activities. So a state spying on us and not allowing us to see the other side of a affair that's shaping global politics, that I don't know what else to call it besides fascistic.
Well, and that's what's sort of forcing people like Tucker Carlson into this role in the first place, which left the lane open for them, which is interesting to me. But I have 2 points to make on this. One, the name of the game in this era is narrative control. If you notice, our government censors information only at times when it is threatened. Because when it's not threatened, it doesn't need to. You can hear that stuff, but you don't have a necessity of change, so it doesn't matter, right? And in the era of the internet, it's outside their control to let us hear Vladimir Putin. Now, they can try to affect it with bots and all that, and they do, right? But at the same time, us just having that information in this era where imperialism is weaker than maybe it's ever been, that's dangerous for them. They cannot allow it, especially when it is outside their control. And Tucker Carlson, just like Trump, is a wild card. He's outside their control. They don't know what he's going to do. It's not that he's always going to do something good. It's they don't control him. That's what is important. And back in the day when, CNN is doing this stuff like that, they had tight controls. Who do you think runs CNN? Who do you think has final say over what goes out? The investors. And who are the investors?
I see people in the chat, at least a couple individuals that don't seem to be convinced. It's this easy, folks. Do you think the proxy war against Russia that has been the center of world news, with the exception of the last 100 days, for the last 3 years, the literal fucking German state has in front of its governmental buildings 4 fucking Ukrainian flags. We had 2 whole years of liberal idiots putting the Ukrainian flag on their fucking bio, of hundreds of billions of dollars being given to neo-Nazis. Do you think that this is an important event for empire? Do you think that empire's controlling of the narrative around this event is important? I'm sure most of you will agree. Now, do you think that the most popular journalist, okay, forget about everything else, the most popular journalist on the internet right now, interviewing the president of the country that has been the main target of US imperialism for the last 3, 4, 5 years, allowing him to say the truth about these affairs, a president that, as we have already elaborated, in many ways is playing an extremely progressive role in world politics and in the movement of history right now, siding with other socialist and anti-imperialist states. Do you think that is a positive event? And if you say that you're against the former, against the imperialist control of the narrative around this key issue that has been so central for imperialism, US NATO imperialism, you can't be against the person with the largest platform allowing the people to see the truth. Why are you against it? Because of other things the person has said? How fucking stupid is that? I don't care how much I disagree with Tucker on other issues, on immigration, whatever the fuck it might be. If he is someone telling an amount of people that we can't even imagine reaching the truth about this central event for US imperialism, that is positive. That is something that we should support, and not only support, we can't just stay there and support it, but support it in the way that we've been doing it, which is explaining it. Explaining it in hopes of the people that are convinced by Tucker to be convinced on the basis of that thing that Tucker has convinced them on, that there's a deeper way to understand it. There's a better way to explain it and understand it, and it's tied to our worldview, not Tucker's. It's not that fucking hard. Just get rid of the purity fetish. What you're scared is coming out and saying, in this area, Tucker is right, and this is positive, because you know that the hordes of activist brain people online are just going to shit on you and call you this and that and a bunch of fucking names. Don't be afraid of that. If you don't lose that fear of getting canceled by people who have done nothing and will do nothing in politics, they will be irrelevant with regards to the movement of history. If you don't lose that fear, you cannot lose the purity fetish. Because that fear is what, even if you claim to support the getting rid of the purity fetish and actually coming to a dialectical materialist analysis, if you're scared of what they'll call you, if you say, in this area, this person who I disagree with in other areas is right, here's how it's progressive, here's why we have to support it, you're going to end up continuously acting politically in a way that's just the purity fetish. It's just, I'm going to reject everything that's not up to the standards that I hold. So reflect on that, please.
And here's something that always just grinds my gears to no end at all. It grinds my gears. Okay. So these people do nothing, have built nothing, reach no one, right? Let's be very clear. Going out with your signs and the same 15 people every weekend isn't winning hearts and minds. You're not convincing anyone at that point. If you allow that purity fetish to lead you in this way of siding against Tucker Carlson because, frankly, he's better at reaching people than you are. One, have you ever stopped to think about why you don't reach anybody? That maybe it's not everybody else that's the problem, but maybe it's something to do with your fucking approach. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that you look down on the entire working class of this country and then say somehow that you're going to lead it into a revolution. The working class of this country fucking hates you. Let's be clear on that. And then you shit all over Tucker Carlson actually getting in the ring, stepping up where you have failed, where you have fucking failed. and fighting against actual neo-Nazis. Let's be clear on who these people are. They are Banderite scum. They do not deserve to live. They want to annihilate the entire Russian people. They want to annihilate Slavs in general, everybody else that isn't their pure white race, right? And you call Tucker Carlson a white supremacist? Tucker Carlson is fighting against the Nazis. Fighting against the Nazis. And whatever else he said, whatever else he does, I will challenge him on those things. But on this, he is spot on. Just like all of the soldiers in World War II from this country who went and sacrificed to defeat fascism. They weren't perfect. Tons of them were racist. It was 1942. Of course they were. But did it matter? Not a lick. It didn't matter at all. They stepped up, and without them, the Soviets may have lost the war. And so it's sitting here going like, oh, we shouldn't trust Tucker Carlson. Oh, he's a blah, blah, blah. Who cares? He is fighting Nazis better than you are. Until you can fight those Nazis effectively, keep your mouth shut. Sorry, I don't mean to go off, but they make themselves neo-Nazi collaborators at this point. What else can you call it?
Yeah. No, absolutely true. That couldn't be more true, right? Because it's what's the side that doesn't want Putin's message to be out to the millions of people that would watch it if Tucker does this interview, which he has said he will do. What side are you siding with? You're siding with fucking Nazis. Nazis and imperialists backing Nazis. So that's that. So now to another discussion, a discussion where we very likely disagree greatly on with Tucker. Oh no, but these guys are the Tuckerite communists. Jesus fucking Christ. Immigration, which has been
nonsense, dude. It's crazy. Like things don't have more than one facet to them. Like if I have a pizza, I can only have pepperoni. I can't have mushrooms on it too. You know, it's wild.
Immigration has been an extremely hot topic on the news as of recent. The conservatives are describing it as an invasion of the United States of America. And you look at both sides of the political spectrum, so-called political spectrum's discussion on immigration, and neither side has a genuine proletarian, working class rooted understanding of it. The reality is, as should be evident to all of you, that the only reason why there are people at the border trying to come into this country is because we have literally destroyed their fucking states. No one wants to leave their home. It is when conditions in those places become unbearable by the actions and pressures of imperialism that people are forced to leave for a variety of different particular reasons, whether it is the fact that a socialist country has been strangled through economic warfare and sanctions, and the material conditions have gotten horrible. And there's the pull factor of come to the US. This is the land of opportunity. We have the Hollywood, everyone lives here in a way that's just people chilling in the pool, drinking Coronas and eating steak 24/7. That's the great American dream. So there's these push-pull factors. They're pushed out by the difficult conditions that U.S. imperialism creates if it's a socialist country in order to overthrow the socialist country. If not, if it's a right-wing country, well, it's because, that naturally means horrible conditions for their people. And those are countries backed by the U.S. empire. And there's these pull factors. So they end up at the border. If you're not understanding imperialism, you're not understanding migration. You can't understand why people leave, and you can't understand why a faction of the ruling class wants them here. Migration allows for imperialist countries to have a cheap pool of labor. These migrant workers are super exploited. They are extremely exploited. They're paid pennies on the dollar of a regular American worker who themselves are struggling to survive. So our working class is struggling to survive. 60% plus 70% are living paycheck to paycheck. Now these undocumented workers are making pennies on the dollar of what our working class is making. They're a super exploited group of people that are utilized after they're pushed out because of the conditions of imperialism we have described. They're utilized as a base of cheap labor that in many ways strengthens capital because it lowers the bargaining capacity of the working class, because the capitalists can just go and instead of paying for the labor power of an American worker that has a certain level of rights that they have won through their struggles and minimum wage that they have to be paid, they could just pay undocumented migrant workers illegally less and super exploit them. It weakens labor through and through, both labor at home, and it creates a horrendous condition for migrant workers, and it's central for imperialism. And the only answer to this crisis, it's not the one that the Democrats propose, it's not the one that the Republicans propose, some of which has, came through with a horrendous, very racist language. They're poisoning the blood of our nation. What the fuck Hitlerite bullshit is that? The real answer is that you have to destroy imperialism. It is only socialists who have the answer to this. In Britain, one of the central reasons why Brexit was supported very popularly by the working class was because of the fact that British capitalists were using cheaper labor from other workers in the EU, and it became very hard for the British working class to bargain. And people from the left, like George Galloway, supported Brexit, and at that time, I was in favor of those positions because they increased the bargaining power of the British working class. But what happened? Because I was ignorant of the role that this migrant labor plays for imperialism, which is something that we've discussed with Emmanuel Ness, wrote an excellent book, Migration as Economic Imperialism. We did a whole event on it. I've written a review of it. What happened with Britain was that they stopped getting workers from EU. They started bringing in workers from Africa that they paid even less and made the conditions even worse. So the migrant labor is a structural necessity for modern imperialism. And it creates a situation where both sides of the discussion represent capital. The Republican, the interest backing the Republican anti-immigration positions, they're not really anti-immigrants. If you look at the financial sources, all those companies benefit from immigrant labor that they super exploit and pay under the wages of regular American workers. So the imperialists will always need a certain degree of migration in order to combat the bargaining power and the strength of their working class. And the real position is not attacking migrants. The real position is not, any of the ones that are promoted, as a fully open border. The real position is organized workers against the imperialist system that creates this crisis, that creates horrendous conditions both for our workers at home and for these migrant workers whose lives are horrendous because of the imperialist system. And it's a truly tragic situation, but it's produced by imperialism through and through.
Yeah, let's be. I'm going to do the meme here. Let's be very clear. But the neither the Republicans nor the Democrats want to lower illegal immigration, right? They are very, very aware of what their international policies do to other countries. They're not stupid. But what is the whole securing the border thing? It's an industry, isn't it? Billions are spent on this. Billions. That's people getting rich. That's capital accumulation right there. Right? So, and here's the thing. This is a question that a lot of your coworkers, your family are going to ask if you begin talking to them about socialism, right? But what about the immigration crisis? There is a record number of illegal immigrants entering the country right now. That's a fact. You can't just, will that away or push it to the side. What you do is you explain what causes that and what the ruling class knows causes it, right? We can take Mexico and NAFTA as a really good example. When NAFTA goes into effect, there were millions of small farms all over Mexico that shut down because they could not afford to compete with the products from Monsanto, right? They get pushed into cities and into a small number of factories that were closed here and moved to Mexico. And then what happens to all the people who are left over? Right? They are left in an impossible situation. So they go north, right? Where they hear everything's better. But is it? No, it's not better when they get here. They have to live in fear their whole lives. They have to work for pennies. I mean, this entire process is lose-lose for the working class on every level. And if anyone's under the impression that the Democrats will fix the border, the Republicans will fix the border, ask them why they haven't done that in the last 50 years. Because they have no intention of doing that. They have no intention of stemming the tide of illegal immigration. In fact, they would prefer the immigration be illegal, right? Because that, again, what Carlos was just saying, lowers bargaining power, lowers wage rates, etc. In aggregate, that all adds up, right? And so we can't just like take this anarchistic, open the border up kind of thing, because it's not going to work. We need a realistic, real solution to this. If your coworkers genuinely care about stopping the immigration crisis, then they need to become anti-imperialist. What's good for Mexican workers is good for American workers. What's good for Palestinian workers is good for American workers. What's good for South African workers is good for American workers. It's the ruling class that is a problem, using all of this as one, a means of capital accumulation, then two, a political football. We're all fighting each other over is Biden's border policy better or is Trump's? They're both not a policy intending to fix a problem.
No, you couldn't be any more right, man. It's definitely a political football, like many other issues where the options they present are not options. Stopping migration is not on the table for either party. Doing the slightest bit to stop migration is not on the table. Get that through your head. It's not on the table. Let me ask you a question. If they're genuinely concerned about so-called rising rates in crimes due to migrants or whatever, what does that provide if not a reason to amplify the police departments that they love funding? You know, there's so many ways in which the migration phenomenon helps the interest of capital that's backing the people who claim to be against migrants, who claim to want to do something about the crisis at the border, the invasion. But it's just used as a political, as a way to divide working class people, not just American workers from migrant workers, but Americans workers from each other. Because elections on the key issues, the two parties are the same. And then you have issues like this where they pretend to be different. They pretend to be different in order to make the decision on the election on this non-option. It's a way of getting a non-option to allow that non-option to make this other non-option look like an option. Because the election is not really an option. You're voting for the same class. You're voting for the same class, shared interest in foreign policy and national policy, same shit. They use this non-option in order to legitimize this other electoral non-option and make it look like an option. So steer away from it. Steer away from it. Have a comprehensive analysis of how imperialism produces and benefits from this phenomenon, how it affects both migrant and native workers, and how the interest ultimately of both sides of workers, as Noah mentioned, is the same. We have the same interest. The people that are using migrant workers, super exploiting them in order to lower our bargaining capacity as American workers, are the same people that destroyed the countries of the migrant workers. So it's the same enemy. It's the same enemy. That should always be our position. It's the same enemy. If the ruling class wants to divide to conquer us, our task is always to reunite, to show the points of unity that we have as workers across the board, not just within our country, outside as well, and who the real enemy is. And we have the benefit of being within the belly of the beast, which means that the enemy that all these other countries has is not just their national bourgeoisie, but also our enemy. So it's very explicitly seen who the real enemy is.
That's a really good point, brother. I think also when people sort of talk about, even when the fake left mentions this, they talk about it incorrectly, because at the bottom, underneath even them saying they stand with workers in some other country, their assumptions that are baked into that separate us and make it seem as if our working class and their working class are at odds, which is exactly what the bourgeois view is and want us to think, right? But when they sort of, what they do is they sort of superimpose themselves into being Chinese for a moment, right? Because they're not rooted in their own country and their own working class. They look down on it. But the Chinese working class, they're the good one, right? And our workers are bad because they benefit from the exploitation of workers over there, and that's just not the case. You know who benefits from the exploitation of both? The ruling class, international finance capital. That is who benefits.
And the fear mongering not only divides, as we say, the American worker from the migrant worker, and the American worker, the liberal one from the conservative one, right? It also allows fear mongering about the countries that are most directly being targeted by U.S. imperialism, which is China. They specifically publicize Chinese-looking, Asian-looking people at the border coming in, and they always phrase it as, middle-aged man, not middle-aged man, but they phrase it in a way that's like implying these are the sorts of people that would be recruited for an invasion of our country. It's an invasion. So it's not only like, that's another dimension to it that's directly connected to imperialism. China's invading us through migrants that are of the age of the sort of people that can pick up guns and fight and overthrow our government and kill your families and do all these horrible things. So it's fear-mongering through and through. It's bullshit. And it's just used to divide workers and get one faction of them or both of them to go along with the train of capitalist imperialism.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to...
Military-aged males, that's the term they use. Military-aged males.
That's exactly the term they use. It seems as if they're trying to bring up this oldie-timey version of racism where anti-racists and racists all battle each other in the streets, but we're past that era. Most of us are anti-racist nowadays. It's 2024. Not to say there aren't still racists, but that is, as a general strategy to try to push onto the population, ain't going to have the same effect it had in the days of Jim Crow. We have a different basic social relation now, right? We're after the civil rights revolution. That changed everything. And this sort of xenophobic position that they try to push into it is trying to save that division, that faction, as they used to call it back in the day, when Madison was first writing about how the working people would be prevented from taking over if we were given the right to vote.
Absolutely.
Carlos is muted. I'll just ramble on.
I think we covered that pretty thoroughly. Hopefully we're able to successfully bring to light the actual Marxist position on this issue, which is the one you'll never hear in mainstream media and in a lot of the so-called independent media. Okay, so our next clip that we are going to discuss is from Theo Von and Shane Gillis, two of the most famous
funny dudes.
They are very funny dudes. But this is from a podcast, and they're ranting about how bad the government is. And again, there's a reason why these dudes are so prolific, and so known and popular. There's something about them that our people are connecting with. So whenever there's people like this, whether it's Carlson, Jordan Peterson, liberal versions of those, we have to engage with them as Marxists and see how it is that the people that agree with them can go from agreeing with them to agreeing with us. You do that by finding the point of contact and then criticizing all the other stuff after you have found that point of contact, that point of contact, that common ground. It's very basic, but we forget about it often in our political practice and just go straight to condemnation. No one's convinced by that. But anyways, let's listen into what Shane Gillis and Theo Vaughn have to say.
Now they're just the politics now they're just blatantly just stealing money.
Nuts, dude.
Dude, how crazy that the politics now they're just blatantly just stealing money.
Nuts, dude.
And smelling and molesting children.
It's crazy. Dude, no one cares. There's nothing we can do
just
about
realized
it.
Even if we voted,
There's nothing we can do about it.
Not
There's
at all.
nothing we can do about it.
We're all trapped in this fucking this money funneling all our money to fucking fight wars. Thankfully, our government is protecting all these people. That's the best thing.
And they killed Epstein just.
Bro, I can't get a pothole filled in fucking New Orleans, but you can fill a fucking 9-year-old out in the middle of the fucking ocean. Fuck this whole fucking government,
It's
dude.
crazy.
It's a
crazy.
bunch of sick fucking people, bro.
Yeah, man.
And a lot of it, I just wonder if it's just power. How long, like you were saying, like generations of fucking power. Do you just get so sick that even caring about somebody doesn't even seem like it makes any sense to you anymore?
Yeah.
It's literally like a game of like a Risk or one of those. It's like a computer game someone's playing.
And
They're so close to beating it, though. They're so close to beating the game.
we just need
They're
to drain
so
the swamp,
close.
dude.
They need like $60 trillion more from us, dude. And then
We're
they'll
gonna
beat the
win.
game.
Once we state Ukraine, we're back.
True.
Dude, how crazy that our
They're not wrong. They are not wrong at all. This is how people talk about the government these days. Think about how messed up our society is when our ruling class literally has a widely known about pedophile ring, pedophilia ring island where they would sexually assault children, allegedly. And then the guy organizing this entire thing, committed suicide in prison. I mean, come on. We all know the thing with Epstein, but how far gone are we? And how much of a joke must our country be to the rest of the world, especially to revolutionary countries where, like, we have, like they say, like, he can't get a pothole filled in front of his house in New Orleans, but, you know, I'm not going to repeat it, but
They just killed the. Sorry to interrupt. They just killed the bankster in China for corruption.
Exactly. What must the Chinese think of us? Why can we not get our shit together and get these monsters out of power? People ask us all the time, Midwestern Marx guys, why are you so hard on the left? Why are you so hard on people who call themselves communists but don't know a lot of Marxism and pretend they do? Because they are the number one obstacle we have to kicking these monsters and embarrassments out of power, winning our pride as working Americans back. That should be a shame for all of us here that we have not organized well enough to throw them out yet. And so people wonder why I get mad when they're like, oh, but so-and-so is a grifter and, Jackson Hinkle said something mean, so everything he does against Zionism is bad. You miss a point. This is a real struggle. There are pedophiles in power. It isn't a one-off thing. It is a long-standing thing. And there ain't nobody coming to save us. Xi Jinping is not going to come save us. Vladimir Putin is not going to come save us and invade the U.S. If we want our dignity, our lives to be livable, if we want children to be safe, we need to do it ourselves. Ain't nobody else going to do it for us.
And there is an answer. Theo Von said there's nothing we can do. There is something we can do. And that's where we come in. We explain why it is like that. He said, I don't know how it's like that. Is it just power? No. Economic motives, the interest of the capitalist class that profits from all of this, that has its own state that it wrongly calls the American state. It's not the state of the American people. It's the state of the elite. And that does all these other things and covers it up because it controls the judicial system. It controls everything because it's their institutions, the institutions that were propped up to defend the interest of their class, which is the economically dominant class. The whole purpose of those institutions is to allow for the smooth reproduction of the way that things are. Allow for the state of affairs that allows the capitalists to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and you to live in more and more misery, more indebtedness, more unlivable conditions, until at some point, as has happened around the world already, so it's no longer a hypothesis, it's been shown, until things pop. When the people stand up and say, enough of this sham you call democracy, enough of this sham that you call freedom, we're going to overthrow you and establish ourselves, for ourselves, an actual government of, by, and for the people, which is just socialism. That is what socialism is. When the society serves society itself, when how we produce the state, its institutions, civil institutions are controlled by, for, and they're of the working class, the producing classes, the people, el pueblo, if you want to say it in Spanish. That's all socialism is. We have this great phrase in our tradition. It comes from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Government of, by, and for the people. What we've had is government of, by, and for the elite. Government of, by, and for capital. You want government of, by, for the people? That's socialism. It's that simple. There's no way around it. So we can explain it. We can explain that question that Theo poses, and we can show on the basis of that explanation how we can move forward, what we can do about it, and show that, as he said, there's nothing we can do about it is a false statement. The way that you have this revolutionary optimism is not rooted in this form of shallow morality or this utopian thinking. Revolutionary optimism is rooted in a scientific understanding of the contradictions that pervade and that our social order is pregnant with. You understand on the basis of that scientific study that it is impossible, not unlikely, impossible for things to continue on in this way. There's either a revolutionary overthrow of the way that things are, or a mutual destruction of the contending classes, which is another possibility. We see it in Rome and in other states that just collapse. It's up to us to decide. Once you have that understanding that a new world is possible, not because I can dream it, but because I already see its kernels in the current world, in the proletariat, in the working class, in the centralized means of production that the capitalist class has already created and developed, but uses it for private ends. We would just use it for social ends. Once you see how the new world is already in the current world, you cannot be a nihilist. You cannot be a pessimist. You're an optimist because you know that the future world is already contained in the one that we're living in right now. It's not based on some moralistic utopian optimism. It's based on a scientific analysis of our society.
10 million %. And another thing people are constantly getting wrong that drives me bananas is when we talk about this necessity, this potential within the American people for socialism, for government of, by, and for the people, which, by the way, should be our slogan, of, by, and for the people. But when we talk about this, having an American,
that's just a dictatorship of the proletariat, by the way.
Precisely. That's exactly what it is. And when we talk about this, having an American characteristic, because we're American, you hear, liberals and LARPers saying, but what about, other nations? Well, what do you mean, what about other nations? Of course we stand with their working classes.
Mhm.
What they don't get is that there is no us versus them relationship. And that's baked into their assumptions. This is why people, when we say American socialism, go, yeah, but why do you not want indigenous self-determination? Like, what? Where would you get that from? That's your assumption, right? For us, those two things are perfectly in line. And the idea is that all of this sort of objective motion already happening, right? Already going on. The contradictions of capital playing out as circuits of capital continue going and going and going, and debt capital happens, and all of this creates the reproletariat and the new sort of class arising in contradiction to finance, right? All of this happening. We don't just play a passive role, we play an active one, where we have to understand this objective process and participate in it. Not foist our own ideas onto it, but participate in it as an active part of it. And then we get that government of, by, and for the people, that dictatorship of the proletariat, that socialist state, that worker state, that communist country, whatever you want to call it. You could even just call it freedom. I guarantee you there will be libertarians who call it real capitalism, right? It won't matter. We'll have it. And we can only do it together. We can't do it by condemning everybody, right? We do it by working towards this concrete goal and letting that objective thing, not personalities, not purity fetishes, let that thing, that objective goal, be our guide. That scientific outlook help us understand how to take that active role.
Beautifully said. Well, that's going to be our day, our stream. Thank you to all of those who were able to join us. If you want to support the Midwestern Marx Institute, remember it's a people's funded institute. We don't have any grants. We're not getting money from anyone. It's just the people, you the people, who fund our work, and we wouldn't be able to do a fraction of our operations without that. So, it is extremely appreciated when you are able to financially contribute. The best way to do that is by becoming a Patreon, which you can do at patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. Buying our merch, which you can find on the website, Midwestern.
And, let me interrupt real quick, Carlos. There's going to be new merch soon. We have
Yes.
Our production team working on new designs and everything. It's going to be great.
We have a new book that just dropped, as the comrade mentioned. Let me see if I can get it out here. It's a collection of all our books, but this new book from Thomas Riggins. It's assessment of Lenin's extremely important work, Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. So you can buy our books, you can buy our merch, you can become a YouTube member, you can become a Patreon member. Which we're working on something to give shout outs consistently to our Patreon members on every live stream. So yes, if you have the means, please do consider contributing to our institute. We're waging a very important fight, but we live under capitalism. So we need to have that financial background in order to do the work that we're doing. So thank you to all who watched today. Thank you, Noah, for engaging with me in this excellent conversation. I don't want to say joining me, because it's not. It's our show. It makes it sound like it's my show if I say joining me. So it's been great, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye, everyone.
Racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political